I think one of the biggest misconceptions about starting a 3D printing business is actually getting a 3D printer. But unfortunately, that is not the case. I think that is the easiest part of your startup journey. I know this because I actually tried for the last 2 years. There are a lot of things that nobody tells you about when you're starting a 3D printing business, and today we're going to talk about them. First, running a legal business has real costs. You're not gonna like this part, I also didn't like it. But first, you have to register your business wherever you are, in every country, in every district, whatever. Everyone has their own legal process that you have to go through to actually legally own a business. During that period, your costs are gonna vary. For example, just for starting my own business, I needed to pay around 400 euros to start, to just be on the first level without anything else. In that process, you usually have to get a legal documentation about your business. You have to register on an address. You have to be a legal owner. And all this process sounds amazing at first, but actually it has a lot of problems that you're not gonna like if you go this route. And the first one is taxes. You have to pay a lot of taxes every month to actually work. What I mean by this is legal taxes. For example, if you're the only employee, to get your check, to get your salary, on top of that, you have to pay some percent to the country, wherever you are. Every country has this, I would say, a problem. And that is, for example, in my case, minimum salary was 500 euros. On top of that 500 euros, I needed to pay 450 euros to the country. So in total, every month I needed to earn, let's put it like this, 1,000 euros. Half of it goes to the country, half of it goes to my salary. At first sounds nothing special, but you're gonna see that it is not actually very hard to earn money. It's hard to separate yourself when you earn that money that you have to give 50% to a country, to someone else that didn't move a muscle in your road. So this is something that usually people are not telling you. They tell you, just open a Etsy. Okay, and your competitor knows who you are. Your friend, someone you know, is jealous of you, and they report you to the authorities, and you have to pay a fine. So doing it the legal way is hard, but it is in some way the right way. Also, something people would not tell you is that you have to pay rent. So when you're a business owner, depending on your country, you have to register on some location. So you can register on a business locality where you have to rent a real business workspace. In some other cases, you can use your own apartment, a house, whatever. In my case, I could use my own house because the way I registered, it was much simpler. In that way, I had to pay rent. I had to pay bills, electricity, water, and other costs. When you compare it to the first value that I have to pay the country, 500 euros, this is not so big in that way. But still, when you accumulate, you have to pay, in my case, around 100 to 150 euros, which is pretty cheap, but still, it's 150 euros. You usually have to calculate and think about these things pre-advance and actually ask yourself, is it worth it, what you're doing? Second thing nobody tells you about is you have to know right price for your product. You can have some, let's say, this Benchy. Everyone knows a Benchy. Let's say this is a product. To sell this and earn money, your product has to be more expensive. So for example, people usually start thinking that your 3D print has a cost, and that cost is what? A material, a little bit of electricity, and a little bit of headroom that you can earn some money. But usually that's not the case, because you have to think about how many of your benches you have to sell per month to cover the costs that we mentioned before about bills, about legal costs toward the country, and then your price of, let's say, this costs 40 cents. Your 40 cents is no longer 40 cents. It starts going to be like 3 euros, 5 euros. And then you hit a barrier where in your environment you may ask yourself, well, is anyone willing to pay 5 euros for this benchy? And you have to think about these things, because if you sell a lot, like a large quantity of your product, your price usually is advised to be lower, but in a longer run, you're gonna earn some money. But if you use a 3D printer, usually people specialize in creating something very unique, something that is needed in some other company, government entity, and so on. So in that case, they usually bump up the price. Something that also you have to think about when it comes to price is that even if you find a perfect price, it will still be too much. So what I mean by this is, what happened to me was I calculated everything. I got a price of, let's say my product was 15 euros. And with 15 euros, I thought it is perfect. I have some small margin that is gonna go to my salary, that is gonna go to all the costs. I'm gonna cover the material costs, I'm gonna cover other stuff, and boom, I'm gonna have like 2-3 euros of earning after a purchase. But then I realized that my price was based on hypothetical situation. So what I mean by that is, I was thinking, I was researching on internet, I was reading and blah 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 blah, and I came to a loophole where actually it is very expensive in that area of business for that product. So when I started going and doing proper market research, I thought my product is for tourists. But I realized that it is for people who actually sell to the tourists. And I said, okay, hey, we're gonna paraphrase. Hey, my benchy is 15 euros. I think it's amazing. It has all these additional things. It's 3D printed, it's ecological. And I was selling the whole story to the guy, and he said, look, your bench is very beautiful, but first of all, it's very expensive. And I'm like, why is 15 euros so expensive? And he told me that even though it's amazing, first of all, nobody's gonna buy it, because on top of mine 15 euros, the guy, the middleman, has to earn some money. And he says, like, just to earn his bit, he has to add additional 5 euros, and to cover his cost, additional 5 euros. So your bench is not 15 euros, it's 25 euros. But the problem is, nobody's gonna buy this. He can get this in China. And I got so pissed. I thought, I respect China, I respect the manufacturing there, but I thought I was robbed. Because you read all these amazing things, it is amazing, you can do whatever you want, you can print whatever you want, special. And he said, no one is buying it because it's 3D printed. Everyone is buying it because it's cheap. And that changed my thinking, because I realized in that moment, I actually didn't understand my customer. So we come to the next point, and that is, you have to understand your market. What I mean by this, it is not just researching what people say, what people think, and so on, but actually what makes them buy a product. So if I told you, you can buy this benchy for 5 euros, you're gonna say you're out of your mind. I can 3D print it for 5 cents, 5 euros, whatever. Not 5 euros, but 5 cents. But think about what you just said. You have some logic behind your buying. You know that this is just decorative. You roughly know the value, but your value is based on price. You can base it on a lot of things depending on what you do. But one of the main reasons why someone would come to you as a guy who has a 3D printer is because of the price. You have to be cheaper than the alternatives. Even though your product is nicer looking, it is, let's say, handmade, homemade, it is locally built in your country, it is not, as I say, in China and whatever, Still, it has to be cheaper because in the modern age where you can go on AliExpress, Alibaba, Temu, you can buy almost everything for a dirt cheap. And that is a real problem for people who want to start a business in the development. And that is, your biggest competition is the price. There is so much headroom that you can lower your price. And if you go any further, you're losing money because you have all the costs every month. You have to also understand market by understanding that a product that is 3D printed probably doesn't mean anything for your market. Because what happened to me was, one of my selling point is that I used ecological friendly material that is 3D printed. Like, additional selling point, it's 3D printed. It is made in my country. It's like locally built. And at the end of the day, what won was the price. So you have to research how your customer thinks, how market thinks, how people look at your technology, because I love 3D printing. I think it's the best technology there is. But not everyone has the same idea. Not everyone shares the same vision or love for using 3D printer. So you have to think about how other people actually think and perceive you. And that is one of the hard things, because you have to be open to criticism. And what I mean by that is, you have to show your product to someone and say, look, this is 25 euros. Would you buy it? And he says, are you out of your mind? This is so expensive. This is horrible. It's plastic. And at the end of the day, you have to say thank you for your feedback. And you have to go home and actually improve. And that can be sometimes discouraging, because during my 2 years of owning a business, I needed to do this analysis with people all the time. And all the time someone found some mistake in my product. Was it a quality? Was it a color? Was it a price? Whatever. And it can get to you. So you have to find a way how to deal with this and kind of separate your emotions from your business, and actually separate yourself from the business. Because at the end of the day, you can have a problem that I had, and it's actually like I was the business and business was me. And if business is failing, I'm failing. And actually that's not true. So try to separate these things. The next problem I had was market didn't know what was possible. So as you already own the 3D printer, you can build whatever you want. You know that you can build a benchy, you can build a balloon. I'm paraphrasing, but what you set your mind to, you can build it. But the problem is that even though it's a very popular technology, it is not popular enough. What I mean by this is, people still don't know what they can do with a 3D printer. You know, but they don't. So usually people start a business thinking, oh, I'm just gonna buy a 3D printer and print for other people. And that sounds so simple, so amazing, whatever. But you come to a realization that people actually don't know what they can do. I had situations where I say, I offer a 3D printing service. It's amazing, it's cheap, and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, super. They don't know how they can use it. And you have to go, if you do a business to business, you have to go to your potential customers and say, I'm open to do educational hour with you and show you what you can do in your business that is going to get improved by 3D printer. If you go to a customer, like business to client, you have to do the same thing, and it's very tiring. It is time consuming. You have to be very resilient in this way. My fifth point is 3D printing business is much more than a 3D printer. So as I said, you loved the 3D printer technology. I love it. It's amazing. But when you reach to a point where you say, I want to start a 3D printing business, you have to separate the 3D printer and put it in like a small box on the side. And then you get like 6 other boxes that you have to deal. So for example, you have to think about the overhead, taxes and contributions, customer support, communication with customers. It's a very tiring job. Purchasing, how are you going to purchase all the parts? What is missing, what is not? Delay in the shipment and maintenance. One of the things that I really hated during my business is it's kind of going okay. I'm communicating with customers, it's okay. I'm kind of satisfied, and they say, okay, in 2 days I need this print because that is a selling point. You can do it immediately. And then out of the sudden, your 3D printer stops working. And you don't know what it is because not every printer has the documentation about it. And that was such a, how to say, pain in the ass. So you have to juggle a lot of balls when you're doing this stuff. It is not just 3D printing. When you start 3D printing business, put it in aside and think about everything else. You already know how to do a 3D printer, how to create stuff. Kind of forget about it. My sixth point is why so many 3D printing businesses fail. So a lot of 3D printing businesses fail because they don't understand the business side. As I said, it is not just a machine. That's just like a tool. But actually, you have a lot of things that you have to analyze, that you have to think about, that you have to communicate with a lot of people, that you have to get out of your comfort zone, that you have to sometimes argue with someone about your product that they don't understand. People are going to try to scam you all the time. They're going to try to sell you something that is not real. For example, I had a meeting with someone. They were selling me their service for 1 hour. They were telling me how I didn't have a vision, my business is out of idea, blah, 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 blah. And what they were selling me was a logo design that I had to pay let's say 50 euros. And at the end, I let them finish everything. And at the end of the day, I explained them what is the meaning of my business, what is the story about it, etc., etc. And they didn't have anything else to say, and they just went their way. So try to think more about business, your clients, these kind of things. So my closing point for this video is, when you're starting a 3D printing business, don't ask yourself which is the best 3D printer you can buy. You should ask yourself, what is gonna earn me money? Thank you guys for this video, for watching. I hope you liked it. Comment please if you have any questions. I'm gonna try to answer them. And also like, share, subscribe. Thank you.